well, it's safe to say this presidential race has been unpredictable. It's taken many twists and turns, including arguing over who's the establishment candidate versus the outsider. Many Americans are searching for a candidate who's not the typical politician. So what does it mean to be considered an outsider or an establishment figure? Let's have a fair and balanced debate. Communications Director for American Crossroads, Ian Pryor, and Campaign Director for Center for American Progress Action Fund, Emily Tisch Sussman. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Ian, I want to start with you. I want to take a look at some of these polls, and we can see these are new Fox News polls. Trump still getting 41% over Cruz's 38%, Kasich at 17%. So we're still seeing the outsider candidates. If we remember when the field was once 17 and now it's narrowed, but we're still seeing the outsider candidate being the one that voters want. Tell me how does the outsider candidate prevail here, and then what?
Well, I think for someone like Trump, he needs to keep doing what he's doing, which is he's not going out there giving sort of pre-sanitized talking points that people have been hearing for years. He's going out there and speaking his mind. I mean, take a look at his post-election press conferences. It's like stream of consciousness. It's something that most people don't hear. I mean, when you turn into
people are tuning in.
Exactly. When people tune into a Hillary Clinton press conference, you've heard all that before. You've heard it from her. You've heard it from other politicians. When you tune in and hear Trump, you're hearing something that you've never heard before. He's not going to have a filter. He's going to say what's on his mind, and I think that is very appealing to the American people who for years have heard the same thing and gotten no results.
Okay, appealing, Emily, but is that going to translate into votes?
I think there's a very big difference there. People are tuning in. We don't know necessarily why they're tuning in. I think, actually, I know that a lot of people are tuning in just for the spectacle of it, because you don't know what he's going to say, and find it very unappealing, actually, once he starts. And it really is not turning into votes for a lot of people. He really is hitting a ceiling.
But we are seeing thousands turn out than we haven't seen before. So there's a larger number of Republicans coming out, and they are voting in the primaries. Is that going to be the same result in the general?
So I don't know that we can necessarily say that it will translate to the general. They're turning out in large numbers for the Republican primaries, more than they have in the past two cycles, certainly, but for every candidate. He is turning out as many people for him as against him. So I do think that we can see that continue to trend in the general election. He probably hits a ceiling of support. It's probably around this 35% support where he has. And then the piece that we really don't know is how heavily that influences people maybe to vote for a third party, maybe another candidate, or even do they move just traditional Republican voters, do they move to a Democratic candidate just because Trump is so unpredictable?
Do you think that he's hit a ceiling, Ian?
Well, I do agree. I mean, if you think about it, he has 37% of the popular vote. Now, he's been able to amass 50% of the delegates as a result of that plurality. But that's 63% of the Republican primary electorate that has voted against Donald Trump. I think if you look on the Democratic side, you have Hillary Clinton, who has a far greater percentage of the vote. She's at 60%. But the interesting thing on the Democratic side is you have the front runner who performs worse in the general election than Bernie Sanders, who's really only at about 42%. So you have the establishment lining up behind Hillary Clinton, which you would expect, but Bernie Sanders against Trump, against Cruz, and against Kasich does better than Hillary Clinton in a general election matchup.
I do want to talk about Bernie Sanders, but I have one more Republican question for you, because we talk so much about anti-establishment, anti-establishment. The fact of the matter is that these establishment figures have been elected. They are working. There are three branches of government. So regardless of the candidate who is elected, they have to work with the establishment. So how does that work? How does the future look?
Well, I think whoever is elected president is going to have to work with Congress, is going to have to work with elected officials to get things done. You can run as an outsider in a campaign, but you can't be a president as an outsider, or else you'll get nothing done. And we've seen it from Trump. We've seen him out working with Speaker Ryan, working with Leader McConnell. They're going to have to do it. Even Ted Cruz, if Ted Cruz happens to be president, he hasn't, worked well with some of the senators in his term there, but he's going to have to work with the Senate, whether it's Republican or Democrat, in order to get his priorities passed.
So the outsider's going to have to become an insider, essentially.
They have to. I mean, yeah. But do they actually do it is the real question. I think we're already seeing problems of Republican leadership governing, considering they've embraced this outsider for the last couple of cycles, ever since really the rise of the Tea Party in about the 2010 elections. So now the Republicans, they said, once we start to hold the Congress, then we will actually govern. That is not the case. That is not what's happening. Republicans control the House, already ousted the leader, control the Senate, are barely getting things through and now can't even begin to hold hearings for a Supreme Court nominee. So you do have to figure out what is working together, what is keeping the government functioning.
And we could do a whole other debate on that. But I do want to talk about the Democratic side before we end this conversation. And I want to put up a poll where you can see that Hillary Clinton is still leading with support as she was in August. She is now. But you can see Sanders, he jumped a little bit, and I think that's actually supposed to say now 41% to 23%. Regardless, that's not correct. But he has jumped in support. He is the outsider, and there is an increase. So the outsider candidate, we're seeing voters want it on both sides of the aisle. What are the Democratic voters looking for right now ahead of the general election?
I think there is a piece of the electorate that says all we keep hearing is that Washington is broken. So everyone who comes from Washington must be broken, right? Everything that comes out there. And then a message like Sanders becomes appealing because it's very broad and has huge platitudes. And he says, you know, I'll deliver everything that we can possibly deliver under the sun. And so people are being drawn to that. But it does really come down to the fact when candidates want to see what is going to happen in my lives, what is going to happen to the economy, what is going to bring jobs back, what is going to grow the economy, what is realistic. I think that does become more and more important as we get towards the general election.
Okay, so there's the correct polling right there. Ian, I want to give you the last word because, like I said, even though he's not necessarily 50-50 with her, we have seen a huge jump in his support.
Well, I think part of that is him positioning himself as the outsider, and part of that is Hillary Clinton is the ultimate insider. I mean, this is someone who was Secretary of State for Obama. Her president was her husband was a two-term president. I mean, she's been plotting her presidency since before her wisdom teeth came in. So she is the ultimate establishment candidate, and Bernie Sanders is able to draw a contrast with her, and he's appealing to millions of voters out there who don't want Hillary Clinton.
All right, well, thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate it. Ian and Emily, I'm sure we're going to have you guys back for more discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And coming up, turf.